This is Empire Sports Alliance, unfiltered. No fluff, no filters, just the real side of sports. We're talking athletes, coaches, agents, doctors, executives, the people behind the scenes who actually move the needle. From building careers to surviving the grind to winning off the field. This is where real conversations collide.
Welcome to Empire Sports Alliance Unfiltered. I'm Ronnie, my co-host Eric, and we got a guest here today. We got Ryan Robichaud with Armanino. He's the director of business management there, and working with athletes as well as entertainers, etc. So welcome on the show.
Happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Well, again, you work with mostly pro athletes and entertainers, right? So why don't we just dive right into it in terms of what does a business manager actually do and, on a daily basis?
I'd like to say that we're kind of like your financial firewall, for lack of a better term. So usually if there's anything coming up in terms of compliance, in terms of tax, your day-to-day financial well-being, we want to be that first call. Yes, we do bill pay as a part of the job. We file your tax returns. I'd say that the job is probably equal parts accounting, consulting, and therapy, all kind of rolled into one sometimes. Especially
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? From a therapy perspective?
I'd say that a lot of the time, when you're dealing with any individual, I think that finances can be a stress. And I think over the years that we've seen, during COVID, during lockouts, SAG-AFTRA, we've seen a lot of our clients impacted in different ways. So I'd say that they rely on us for just that sense of calm, that sense of just tell me everything's going to be okay. And I think one of the things that we want to try and do is be proactive as possible to set our clients up with a reserve and have them practice, decent budgeting habits. So when those situations arise, that they're going to freak out, but they freak out a little less, I tend to find.
I'm just curious, do you work hand in hand with the agent who, so when I was with the Dodgers, the head trainer was the overseer for everyone. And then you have the orthos, the spine guys, the rehab, you have me. Everyone was under him. Who's kind of in charge there? Is it you're taking the lead and the agent's under, or vice versa?
I think it's working in tandem a lot of the time. I think an agent's got the day-to-day responsibilities for protecting, the brand, let's call it, of an athlete, what their endorsement deals look like, contract negotiations with the team, and then we're kind of brought in on, the tax compliance side of things to make sure that, everything is in line with state requirements for each one of the states that's going to withhold for each one of those athletes, and planning, right? So if, hey, we're thinking about signing a deal, with this team in particular from this specific state, what do we need to do to be in compliance with that state? That's where we come in. If they're going to move teams, they get traded, they sign in free agency with another team, we're helping with the relocation aspect of that, get utilities set up at the new home, negotiate, rent if they're renting a home, if they're looking to buy something, we're putting together their personal financial statement to make sure that we can, secure them a mortgage at that point in time. So it's really anything involving a dollar. We're kind of involved in some way, shape, or form.
Got it. So how difficult is it with, I'll say, baseball, for example? They're going to multiple cities throughout the season. Football's more limited, obviously, but trying to figure out the tax. Okay, you played this amount of games in this city and this amount in this city, and you got to pay X amount. I mean, is it a headache, or you just throw it in a formula and it spits it out?
Well, we do what's called a duty day schedule. So typically we're looking at your days that you're earning income in any one of those specific states, a portion of your W-2 salary is going to be apportioned to that state. Now, a lot of the time, team payrolls don't actually withhold in each one of the states that you're playing in. They're not necessarily obligated to do so. So throughout the course of the year, we're actually tracking that schedule. So travel days if you play in a different country, baseball, good example, you have games in Toronto, right? So we're apportioning some of that income to Canada, and we'll need to do a Canadian tax return at some point in time. So any athlete that's playing kind of in United States sports, you're going to be filing somewhere between 10 to 25 state tax returns over the course of the year. So it's really important to make sure that you're withholding your income appropriately and not spending every dollar that you have, because Uncle Sam's going to want to take his cut, right? So we want to make sure that, we're setting aside, on a base level, maybe 30 to 40%, for state returns, if we can, on a conservative basis, to make sure that you're covered and you're not hit with a big tax bill at the end of the year that you say, what the heck, I don't have the cash to be able to spread this.
So you really work hand in hand from with attorneys, advisors, et cetera, right? And again, your
Yep.
part is, every time there's a dollar being spent, obviously, you coordinate with them from a legal perspective, from tax efficiency perspective, as well as investment management piece. That's, you coordinate with the group.
Yeah. And so I'd say that, sometimes it kind of depends on where we're brought in from the process to see, Ronnie, you know this very well, but we all play nice in the sandbox, right? It's a group client for all of us. So it's my client as much as yours. It's not my client, it's our client, right? So I need to work in tandem with you to be able to give you an idea of what cash flow looks like for each one of these athletes, coaches, whoever it might be in particular, to then say, based upon their financial plan that we've put together as a group, this is the amount that we're going to be able to send on a monthly basis to make sure that it's invested properly and have their money earning income for them, right? I'd say that from the agent side of things, we're kind of brought in. I'd say the first time, obviously, is to file taxes, because that's kind of first and foremost a responsibility. And I'd say one thing that's important to note, and no disrespect, you have an opportunity to earn wealth and income, but you have a responsibility to file a tax return. So I'd say that a lot of the times it's either a financial advisor being brought in kind of first and foremost, or it's my team being brought in, but it doesn't really matter. It's just from that point on, maybe who's the quarterback, so to speak, of a lot of the dialogue that goes on between a player. Some of those ones, we obviously would like to have a personal relationship with that player and be able to speak to them directly about things. And I think the best relationships that we have with agents are the ones where they, know and trust us, and we're keeping them informed of everything that's kind of going on with the client. If it looks like cash is a little bit tight for some reason, we want to put together a strategy to have it be alleviated at some point in time. And that could look in the terms of an endorsement deal. Maybe there's extra money kind of coming in from the side of things outside of the W-2 earnings. But I'd say for those opportunities, we want to mitigate that risk as much as possible and have their brand really work for them, right? We don't want them to take, a branded content opportunity that's not necessarily in line with their brand strategy just to have a quick buck because they've, overspent every single month and are trying to claw away at some cash. We want to make sure that we establish good budgeting habits from the start. And that's why I think that if you can get a client as a rookie, you get to build that relationship from the beginning of their career and those good saving habits. If you get that from the start, that's, in my opinion, the best place to start with an athlete.
So you mentioned it a few times in regards to taxes, right? So is that something that you see basically being the biggest issue from a perspective, if it's an NIL client, if it's a pro athlete, an entertainer, et cetera, where that's like the number one thing? I'm just thinking about the audience, right? Something they shouldn't be forgetting about is like, hey, whatever type of dollar you're getting, if it's endorsement, if it's a contract, whatnot, but be responsible in regards to your taxes. Would you say that's like one of the number one things?
I say good rule of thumb, and it's better to be safe than to be sorry. Just be prepared to take home half of what you are. I'd say that's, It's
Yeah.
sad, but it is kind of the reality, right? So I'd say that if you have that in the back of your head, just know that that's the reality. You listen to a lot of players, if they go on podcasts, things of that nature, they talk about their rookie deal. They're like, oh, great. I want to buy mom and dad a house. I want to get the car. I want to get the jewelry, whatever it might be. And they look at their first paycheck and they go, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be X and it's half of X. Why? And I think it's the first thing that, there's not a ton of financial literacy growing up and going through schools as far as tax is concerned, right? We have, history, social sciences, whatever it might be. Tax ain't a part of that, right? So with a lot of these guys, the first time that they're really exposed to it is that first paycheck, which can be a harrowing experience if you're expecting something, but it's the first time they're coming into an exorbitant amount of money for in their lives.
So how do you tell them, because they're excited, they're coming into all this money? Do you say, all right, why don't you take 10%? I mean, is it a percentage? Is it a number that they're allowed to go buy whatever they want? How do you have that conversation?
I think establishing a budget from the start of a relationship is really important. So I think first we start with those those costs that are going to be set costs, right? So if you want to go and rent a place, try and keep it reasonable. I'd say that on your rookie contract, you don't get your dream home. For a lot of these sports, you get 4 or 5 years, right, on your rookie deal. If you get traded in year 2, yes, you got an investment, but you spent a lot of your capital on that investment. And if you do need cash, you're looking to have to sell that. And are you going to turn a profit or are you not? So I'd say from a budgeting perspective, we can say, hey, look, if let's say 45% is going to go to taxes, you've got your agent commissions that need to be processed. Maybe if legal is taking a cut, you've got legal coming out of their fee. So afterwards, if you're, let's say every day-to-day living expenses for set costs are 10%, yeah, maybe it's 10, 15%, something like that. And we'll call it like ancillary spending for the most part.
Right.
But I think it's important to, from the outset, figure out what those set costs are going to be. So, if you have a student loan, if you have a disability insurance loan, which a lot of athletes don't realize that they might have coming into a draft, is the school might have taken out a policy on their behalf that they're not even aware of. And so then you get hit with a $30,000 loan that you didn't know that you had. And unfortunately, if you don't have somebody who's knowledgeable on your team, that could go into arrears and impact your credit, from the outset, but, right after you get drafted. So I think one of the things that we like to do is establish good credit from the start. So I think it's important to open up a couple small credit cards in your name, put your Spotify subscription on it, put your Netflix, whatever it might be, and just put it on auto pay and forget about it. And you can do a lot of these things in advance of a draft too. Because if you think about it, as soon as you get drafted, you get drafted by the Dodgers. Great. So now you need to get a place in LA. If you're a 18, 19-year-old kid who's going there and playing kind of for the first time, you don't really have established credit. You might not even have a credit card. You might just have a debit card to your name, right? And that also might be a joint account with your parents a lot of the time. So you got these guys coming into their first living situation, not with established credit. And so, yeah, somebody might know their name if they do a Google search, but your average realtor might not know who that person is. So if you're taking a look to rent a place, they might say, okay, well, you don't have great credit, so I want, 6 months in advance on rent just so that I know that this won't go into default. Well, it's money that's not in your pocket anymore. It's not earning you anything that you have to give to somebody else just because you weren't proactive about establishing credit from the start. So I do think it's pretty important to do that at the outset of a relationship, with an athlete event.
How much is guaranteed money versus non-guaranteed money come into play with budgeting and saying, okay, well, this isn't guaranteed, so are we not counting on it? And it's a Christmas bonus if you get it, or do you count it?
I don't really count it. I'd say that it depends. I'd say that maybe for somebody who's on a rookie contract, I think it's important to just be as frugal as possible. And that really kind of goes from any athlete at the outset of their career, right? If you started getting into, I bought 4 or 5 houses and I'm a wide receiver, I'm the best receiver in the league. I've been doing this for 4 years. And all of a sudden you have a debilitating injury that kind of comes up that shortens your playing career and your earning potential. I think athletes in general should look at anything as short-term earnings. And what can you do to maximize those short-term earnings? If you're frugal from
So,
the
right,
outset, you're setting yourself up for later in your career.
is that kind of that short career window versus like long, life horizon, right? I mean, because I see that a lot from a planning perspective, where it's again, I work with business owners as well, but in terms of, the challenges an athlete, let's face it, their business as well. They face, they
Yep.
have to make these extremely important decisions. Some of them very simple, as you just kind of lined out. At a very young age, where they have very little, life experience, plus probably an overwhelming experience. If you think the NFL draft coming up, you get drafted second, third round, etc. But then also in terms of like realizing, they have played football all their life up to this point, but that career might only last 5 years, right? In terms of the compressed timeline they really have, I think,
Mhm.
would you say in terms of like they really have to emphasize on that short period of time, and you don't know, maybe it's going to be longer, that they really have available to them, because
Well,
the
not
average NFL
everybody is
player doesn't play for 10 years.
no, and not everybody's Jamie Moyer or Mariano Rivera playing into their
Right.
40s, right? So I'd say that, yeah, you do have to look at it as a short-term window of earnings on average across most sports. It's like 5 to 6 years, I think. So I think whatever you can do to maximize that earning potential while also looking to the future in mind. I'd say that the smartest move an athlete can make is to be frugal, say no to a lot of things, right? You're going to have a lot of people come into your lives. It's a family member who's got an investment opportunity of a lifetime that they'd like to do, right? Of course, you would like to take care of your brother, your sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, whoever it might be. But at some point, if you give a mouse a cookie, you know, the old adage, you might get taken advantage of. And some families, unfortunately, do that. So I think if you're frugal from the outset and start thinking about life after your career, during your career, and when you're young, you know, I think that you have a lot of opportunity with networking based upon your brand and the people that kind of come into your lives that can help you after your playing career. So find an interest, if it's something like, getting your CFP, if it's something like any type of further education, you want to go into real estate, insurance, whatever it might be. I think if you start thinking about that during your playing career, I think it makes the transition a heck of a lot easier after your playing career when you have an idea of what to do in mind instead of it being, all right, my career's done. Who am I outside of this jersey? You know what I mean?
So, question on that, because, my background is sports chiropractic physiotherapist. And my thought is, hey, why doesn't a business manager, agent talk to the athlete about saying, put X amount of dollars into yourself from a health perspective? Because if I'm able to keep a guy on the field for an extra even year or 2 years, how much more money is that worth to everyone? Let's be honest. And it just kind of seems like a lot of guys want whatever the team could provide. And you're only as good as whatever that training staff has to offer. If it's old school thought and they're not progressive on a lot of stuff, you're not going to get it. How do you talk to an athlete about spending the money on themselves to prolong their career?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time with that example in particular, that's kind of happening with the agent. I think the agent has more of a talk with the team directly as to what advice they're getting from medical, from training staff. Are they going to recommend Tommy John surgery? Is it the kind of thing where they can say, no, we can kind of do injections at this point to kind of prolong the season, whatever it might be? And I think it's twofold. I think first and foremost, an athlete is probably thinking about their health. I think it's hard at that time to think about dollars and cents when you're thinking about just their well-being and what they mean to their families. But I do understand the component of, look, you're the predominant breadwinner, earner in this family, and we have a limited window in which to kind of maximize on this. I'd say that I hate to go back to the well again, but yeah, I'd say that saving is kind of the key, right? And I think that if you put together a plan with an athlete, let's call it 10%, let's call it 15%, whatever it might be that you're going to set aside, that's done no matter what. So it's already out the door. So when they're taking a look at their balances and what they have in cash, it's not assuming that amount. And again, for full transparency, that's something that's spoken with the athlete about. But you're right. I think investing in yourself during your playing career, for the longevity of your career and what you're doing afterwards, those are the conversations that a lot of people don't want to have with a rookie, but you kind of have to have it with a rookie, right? No, it doesn't matter. You can have it with an aging veteran. You can have it with a rookie. But, I don't think that any subject regarding your financial future is taboo in any sense of the word. It's just something that I think that every athlete needs to take the responsibility on themselves to have educated, and to be proactive in terms of speaking with their team. Because I think once you have your team established, and if you've got, your attorney, if you have a financial advisor, if you have a tax professional kind of with you, those are the people that you're going to lean on to make decisions. But ultimately, it's your decision at the end of the day. And I think that the more self-educated that you are on the bigger picture of, this is how much spending has been done every month. Maybe if we have a budget, we actualize it. So if I say, hey, your budget is X, you went over it by Y this month in order to be on goal for the year, we got to spend a little bit less over the summer. And realizing that spending is probably going to be a little bit more in the off season for a lot of these guys when they get to do vacations, they get to relax, they finally get to spend some time with their families. We take a look at a budget for December for the holidays. Typically, it's a lot higher than anything else, right? And that's fine as long as it kind of goes back to their plan in general. And it's just, a lot of these guys don't have that plan. Maybe you've surrounded yourself with not the greatest team at some point in time, or you're saying yes to too many things and your money's going out the door and you're not looking at your reports on a monthly basis. You're not engaging with your financial team. You're not engaging with anybody other than your agent and maybe your best buddy who may or may not have your best intentions in mind talking in your ear.
So you're basically saying, Ryan, they're not failing. I mean, they're not planning on failing. They're just failing to plan ahead of time, is what I'm hearing.
It's a great way to put it. And I'd say that, yeah, I think that, most people, if you've been told, your entire career that, oh, you're the best, you're awesome, you're the top wide receiver, you're the, best pitcher in baseball, whatever it might be. There's some ego, to that, right? And a sense of invincibility. And I think like I said, as much as we want to err on the side of caution and saving, and to give these guys a reality check of, look, this could be over tomorrow. So let's make sure that you're insured should something happen to you, is a big part of things. That if you're not proactive about your insurance, that's something that can come back to haunt you at some point in time. And yeah, to your point, I think if you think that your career is going to go 20 years, plan on a quarter of that and try and maximize the time that you have. It's kind of like, you got one life to live, make the most of it. Well, you got one career, make the most of it, and just anticipate it to be a little bit shorter and be happy if it goes longer.
Yeah. Well, if you guys don't mind, let's step away for a segment that, Eric and I call the unfiltered wacky stats. So we'll be right back and talk a little bit more. I would like to know a little bit more in terms of like the social media influence and all that stuff with spending habit. But we'll be right back. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Time for the wacky stats. And since we're talking money, let's kind of go over some stuff related to spending habits, shall we say? So, NBA, Allen Iverson. This guy was pretty successful, right?
I would agree.
All right. Do you know he reportedly spent around $55,000 a month at a single nightclub? Now, despite earning over $200 million over his career, he eventually faced serious financial troubles. But he had a smile on his face.
No, I sure had. Yeah, $50,000 will buy you that. But talking about smile, so one of my favorites, former boxer Mike Tyson, right? Reportedly, he bought his wife a 24 karat gold bathtub for $350,000. So, basically he went bankrupt, despite earning like hundreds of millions. I mean, I'm sure he's doing fine now, but back then. So that's an expensive bath.
So he's not taking the bath in all his money anymore.
I think, no, yes, changed his ways a little bit, seems like. So.
All right. So you think 350 is a lot on a bathtub? How about this one? Shaquille O'Neal once installed a massive custom aquarium in his mansion that reportedly cost around, you ready? $20 million.
For the aquarium itself? Wow.
Yes. Now, that included all the rare fish and exotic design features, but 20 million on an aquarium? Oh my God.
Okay. I got one last one for you here. So in comparison to that, it doesn't even seem that high, but Cristiano Ronaldo owns like multiple ultra like rare watches worth over $2 million combined just on his wrist, right? So it's including like a diamond covered luxury piece, like they're, again, it's just very exotic stuff. So fun stuff. Good for them. Well, we'll go back to Ryan and see in terms of talking about that budgeting. All right. See ya. All right, guys, we're back here. Ryan, a couple of follow-up questions from our, just discussion right now in terms of how do you see that, spending habits for athletes, and I would say it's probably the same thing from an entertainment perspective as well, kind of change in terms of like what's the financial pressure folks kind of experience from a family and friend perspective, but then also the social media influence on lifestyle, right? In terms of, if you get a certain, signing bonus, you probably can't, show up in a certain car. Otherwise, you'd be looked at differently. So how do you see that, and the discussions you have with your clients kind of impacting their spending habits?
Well, it depends. I see plenty of NFL linemen driving, just a simple Ford F-150, whatever it might be. Maybe like an old school Bronco or something like that they want to spend on. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, right? So I'd say that, let's do from day one, draft day. You want to get the tailored suit. You want to be wearing, you've got the watch, you've got the rings, you've got necklace, earrings, whatever it might be. That's all kind of a part of what I would consider to be like a startup cost for kind of an athlete. Yeah, invest in that stuff. Go ahead, do it. You're going to have that one time in your life, and I think that it's okay to spend the money to do something in that respect. Yeah. And I think that social media can be a double-edged sword, right? I'd say that some teams kind of want a lot of their athletes to feel free to share their thoughts, views on, X, whether it be on Instagram, whatever it might be, within certain parameters and kind of keeping their eye focused on the prize. But those are also places where you can have endorsement opportunities, right? And paid partnerships at some point in time. So I think that you certainly need to have a social media presence of some kind in order to maximize that other ancillary income. But at some point, yeah, you can kind of fall into, I guess, a trap of that glitz and glamour, right? And that I'm expected to show up to this thing. I'm expected to pay this much for this. I need this brand. I can only wear Rolexes, whatever it might be, right? Who's really telling you, like, at the end of the day, are you really going to be that upset if somebody's like, oh, look at this poor guy, he's wearing this instead of that or driving this instead of that? I think every athlete has a sense of, I would say, knowledge about what's being said on the internet, but the more that you can kind of minimize that and kind of keep your focus on, health, longevity of your career, family, friends, I think you're better off for it. But I do think that that is a big aspect that people kind of think, oh, I need to spend this in order to do this, or I should be taking care of my family across the board, buying everybody a house, or I should be doing this. That's why I said earlier, 90% of the time, feel free to say no. What's the worst that's going to happen? You've got a rival fan calling you every expletive on earth when you're on the field, right? If you can handle that, I think you can handle some like Twitter trolls and stuff like that online, maybe bagging you about, what you wore to some event for the ESPYs or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I just imagine that, again, it's a double-edged sword from a social media perspective because, again, you always hear athletes as well as entertainers talk about a certain brand, right? In terms of there's also additional revenue stream to be made. So I think in terms of working with the right team of people, kind of like find that, edge, that, that line, that fine line to walk, I think is important. So
Yeah. And along
I
with
would
that,
say that again.
I was going to say, and one of the things that does come with that revenue, I would say is tax planning surrounding it, right? So I want to make sure that we set up, an S corp for a lot of these guys once they start reaching a certain threshold in terms of endorsement opportunities.
Yep.
Because at that point, you're able to, take a lot more write-offs against that you're not necessarily able to do at all with your W-2 income, right? You're a salaried employee of the team. There's nothing that you can do to deduct the cost from that. But your ancillary income, you most certainly are. And I think that if you're working with a tax planner who's keeping you honest about those things, they're effectively able to run your corporation for you, right? So part of the thing that we do for a lot of our athletes is categorize their expenses accordingly, make sure that we're not overzealous in terms of the deductions that we're taking, but also planning on a payroll. So a lot of these guys don't realize you have your own corp. You got to pay yourself out of that corp, right? And it has to be, you can't just pay yourself $1, right? It has to be in alignment with what the earnings are. But you do get the benefit of tax deductions throughout that entity. You can set up a 401k, in the name of the company and be able to put money away for yourself that's tax deductible. But you need the right person to be able to put that together for you and to be able to run it over the course of the year. A lot of these guys, if they don't get it set up the right way, they run into compliance issues. Somebody doesn't file a tax return in a timely fashion. You're hit with interest and penalties and a potential dissolution of the corp entirely, which we'd like to avoid, and just make sure that you have somebody at the helm who knows what they're doing.
So it really sounds like you're there for the long haul. Like even when the career's over, the agent's kind of done at that point. But
Yep.
the idea is for you to hold their hand and keep them going into retirement or next job, whatever it is.
Yep. And I think that part doesn't necessarily go away. If you think about it, they still own the same homes that they did, right? The earning is a little bit different, but hopefully we set them up for long-term success with people like Ronnie, who's able to kind of capitalize on that kind of short-term earning period and sort of turn it into their long-term planning so that when the career is done, they still kind of have the same needs. They still have ideas that they want to bounce off of somebody that's a confidant to say, hey, I'm thinking about going into this business, or, I want to set up a clothing company, a record label, whatever it might be. And I need your guys' help to kind of go ahead and make sure that that's done correctly, keep the books and records, file the appropriate tax returns, or they're just retired and say, a lot of the time, these guys don't know what telephone provider they have or what internet service they have or who their gas company is or the electric company. So somebody's got to keep the lights on, for lack of a better term.
So,
And if the significant other isn't wanting to take upon that responsibility and they've got 8 different homes, once you reach a certain level, you've got staff, you have household staff payroll. You want to make sure everything is properly insured, that insurance is reviewed on an annual basis for all of those things. Everything is still kind of paid timely, just because their career is done from an earnings perspective doesn't make a need go away as far as our services are involved.
so I'm curious. I mean, to me, every accountant should know this stuff. I mean, it's, kind of plug and play stuff. Now financial advisors and business managers, agents, everyone has them and stuff. Why are you still hearing stories of these athletes who make millions of dollars? Why aren't they able to go bankrupt? Do they just stay or broke? And do they just say, I'm not going to listen to this guy. I want to go do this. And
Kind of, for a lack of a better term, right? I'd say that some of the time, I think there is a sense of financial negligence on behalf of the athlete themselves. If they don't want to take responsibility kind of for their actions, I'm not spending any of their money, right? I'm just paying the bills. And I'm letting you know how much is in tax. I'm letting you know when things are due, when we need to file things. But all I can do is provide you information for you to make sound, financial decisions with. You can lead a horse to make water. You can't make them drink, right? So I might present something, or anybody kind of in our field might present something. And ultimately, if they want to go against it, I'll say, hey, if you decide to do this, this is what this means. If you decide to buy this house that's outside of your spending budget, that means that you're going to have less to do this. And then you run into people who, need to take loans out at some point in time because they don't kind of listen. And a lot of those relationships, I tend to find, if there's a mutual benefit between like my team, the financial advisors team, and the athlete themselves, that we have a good rapport, that we have a level of trust, a lot of those time things like that don't really happen. I think if that you live in an ignorance is bliss world, that I'm just going to spend what I'm going to spend and the money's going to be there, that well is going to dry up pretty quickly. And I'll let you know on a monthly basis, we've overspent by this, we have less cash for this. This needs to go out at the door at this point in time. Your Nike deal is coming up for contract renewal and they might not do it, in August of next year. And you were really banking on that money. If you keep spending on this current trajectory, your cash is going to be gone by X. So a lot of the time we can do based upon their ancillary spending and kind of their monthly overhead costs. I'm able to at least predict with people like Ronnie, hey, your cash is going to be up in April of next year. So what do you want to do to preserve it? Do we need to sell an asset? Do we need to talk to the agent about, are there additional endorsements that we can kind of do? But I think if you're not involved, that's where situations can go awry, that, oh, I didn't know that $2 million left this account. I didn't know that this didn't happen. And a lot of the time as a fan, you take a look and say, well, how did you not know that? How did you not know that this went out of your account? I would be checking that on a monthly basis. I would too. But at some point, you can only present them with the information. You can text them, you can call them. But if they don't pick up the phone, if they don't respond to an email, if they don't open a PDF, there's not a whole lot that you can do at some point in time. And that's when we would get involved in a point of what I would call kind of crisis and get in touch with the agent, say, I think you need to have a come to Jesus point with your guy over there. And just say, this is the reality of the situation and there's a change that needs to be made, or else this is what the consequence is going to be.
yeah.
Can I just follow up on that question that Eric posted and say, hey, you got a couple of horror stories to share with us and the audience, that, kind of real stories you went through. It's like everything went.
I don't have horror stories really as much because we try and not have horror stories really happen. I'd say that, there have been times where, we have worked with athletes that did have that negligence, right? That didn't necessarily look at their spending, that were consistently making bad financial decisions across the board and not having a dialogue with us whatsoever. And at some point, I think we need to evaluate our relationship with those athletes to say, is the juice really worth the squeeze? Am I at some point just seen as an email address or a bill payer and not a trusted advisor to these individuals? And if my words are kind of falling on deaf ears, is that something that me as a professional, is that the kind of relationship that I want to be in? And I'd say no. And so there have been times that certainly we've had to take a look at reevaluating, our client agreement and saying, hey, it's been a good run, but at this point in time, I think that we need to kind of transfer things over to another individual who might be able to better service you.
Yeah.
I know, Eric, you have a couple of questions here. Like towards the end of the segment, Ryan, we got have like a couple of quick questions that we need one-word answers to.
So
finish things out.
We call this the walk-off 10. All right. So I'm going to ask.
All right.
10 questions. It's either true, false, or a one-word question. All right. So,
I'll do my best.
What describes the NFL best? Business or entertainment?
Business.
Yeah. True or false? Game day is the busiest day for your job.
False.
One word. What matters more to the NFL? Fans or revenue?
Revenue.
True or false? The Super Bowl is the most stressful week of the year.
False.
Okay. One word. What's more important in your role? Strategy or relationships?
Strategy.
True or false? Social media now plays a huge role in NFL business.
Sure.
One word. The most valuable NFL asset. Players, brand, or media rights?
Players.
What's the harder part of the job? Negotiations or planning?
Planning.
True or false? Fans underestimate how complex the business side is.
True.
Right. One word. Biggest challenge. Revenue, fan engagement, or schedule?
Scheduling.
All right. Well,
I think that was a multifaceted one. And I'll give myself a pat on the back that I didn't do any elaboration there. Thank you very much.
Well, hey, Ryan, very insightful. I certainly appreciate it. I know it's the middle of tax season for you, so you're crazy busy.
Yeah, I got any time for you guys.
On and ensuring that, again, that information seems like, extremely important, right? It doesn't matter.
Of course.
If you're an entertainer or an athlete, then, again, money aspect of things and the little things to take care of and build with that team. So I appreciate you sharing all that. And good luck with the rest of the tax season.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you.